The alleged chemical weapons attack in Syria is creating more tension between the U.S. and Syria's ally, Russia. Earlier this week, President Trump tweeted that the United States' relationship with the country is, quote, worse now than it has ever been, and that includes the Cold War. Our Alex Wagner went to Moscow for the new season of Showtime's The Circus. There, she spoke with younger generations of Russians about how they view the current tensions and Americans. Here's a bit of what they said.
When I say America, what is the first word that pops into your mind?
Trump.
Trump, okay.
Aerosmith?
Aerosmith.
Yeah, why not? Probably McDonald's.
McDonald's.
Yeah, but I think about McDonald's all the time, so.
Okay.
Stars and Stripes.
American pop culture and everything, and probably like comic books.
Liberty.
Those are pretty positive, happy images of America. And yet, in the news today, we read that America and Russia are in a new Cold War.
I totally disagree with that. I don't think that that's the right thing to isolate ourselves from the outer world, especially from America, because America is one of the leading countries in the world.
My point of view is like that those are just wonderful topics for journalists. That's it.
The political decisions that are made right now, they are destructive for all spheres of our life. I think both countries are led by very aggressively oriented people, I'd say.
Do you think one side is more to blame than the other?
Both sides are to be blamed.
Yeah.
So.
I respect Trump, he does his job. I respect Putin, he does his job. But I do my job and do not think I'm not an expert in politics.
What is most intriguing to you about the United States right now?
A lot of media says that we have like this huge propaganda in Russia. Maybe it's true, but I think the surprising thing for me is that American people are more vulnerable to any kind of even small propaganda. For example, if I look at your camera and say, I live in Russia and I just love Putin because he's the greatest communist of all time, your audience is gonna go like, oh my God, communist, so terrible. Poor Russia. But I know for sure they don't know that Russia is not a communist country at all.
Do you believe that when you hear in the American press that the Russians had something to do with the election?
That sounds really funny to me, because how? I don't think that Russia would have done that.
I don't think that it's the job of the media nowadays to say the truth. It's mostly emotional. I mean, if we have
I think the media is sensational. It wants to create stir up emotions.
Exactly, and then to react to the media from other media, from all over the world.
So do you feel that's true for Russian media as well?
Yes.
For all media?
Yes, exactly.
Do you think Putin has been in power too long?
Yes, because sometimes I'm feeling that he's becoming a bit inadequate.
Inadequate.
Yeah, and probably he stops understanding what he wants, what he's doing. And this is frightening for such a level of authority.
I disagree with him on many points, yes, but mostly satisfied with the current political system, yes.
How are you different than the older generation?
People who were born in the Soviet Union, they didn't have a chance to travel around the world. We had this chance because the borders are open and the Western pop culture coming to us.
As Russians, do you feel isolated?
We still got YouTube. well, for serious. We still got YouTube. We watch CBS, we watch Marvel, we watch HBO. Our favorite series is like Game of Thrones, right? No, you cannot isolate us because we got money and we can grab a ticket and visit you if we want. But we are okay here, right? For serious.
CBS News correspondent Alex Wagner is also the host of The Circus and is here with me now. So, Alex, they were clearly pretty comfortable talking publicly about Putin. Maybe it's a stereotype on my part.
Yeah.
They weren't highly critical of him, but it wasn't a love fest either.
Yeah, no, there was expressions of concern about the level of authoritarianism in the Russian government and also his tenure. He's basically been their leader since many of these folks were born. But there's a real defiance, too. I mean, there are a lot of people in that group that appreciate the strength of Putin and the projection of strength. And I think that that's a critical part of the Russian posture today, which is a kind of defiant attitude towards the West, towards critics who would say, oh, you're under the thumb of a repressive government, or you've been isolated by sanctions. The Russian mentality is much more kind of it bristles at the notion that they are somehow in a punitive way today.
I think the other thing that sort of surprised me just in watching that bit right there is that they are very much aware of how the outside world is characterizing Russia and characterizing them.
There is broad dismissal about the West's claims, a number of Western claims, whether it's the poisoning of Sergei Skripal, the intelligence officer in Britain, whether it's the contention that the Russians interfered in the American elections, whether it's the idea of fake news. And part of that, that sort of debate in Russian society or dismissal is due to the fact that Russian state propaganda tells its citizens it's all lies, it's all fake. And what we've seen with the young people here is a kind of ambivalence or apathy towards all media. And at one point he says, you know, the Western media is to blame and the Russian media is to blame. So you have almost a generation of Russians who kind of don't believe in the Fourth Estate, which is interesting and troubling.
Yeah, and also don't seem that bothered by the fact that they can't depend on the media.
No, and social networking, I think, has helped them feel like they're connected to something, which is to say each other. Although I asked them, I said, do you guys use Facebook? And they said, no, we use something called VK, which is a Russian version of Facebook. And they say, we post stories on it. And I said, well, are you concerned that there are fake news stories there in the same way that we're concerned there are fake news stories on Facebook? And they said, yeah, so we don't really know what to believe. But that's just kind of, they accept that and they live their lives.
So that conversation is really fascinating, but you have had a series and will have had a series of conversations for the Circus that are super interesting, including your team interviewed Margarita Simonyan,
who's the head of RT.
Right. Okay, so, you know, many people have their opinions of RT. Certainly, you know, some of their coverage has been particularly biased in favor of Russia. But, you know, tell us about that interview.
That interview, she's a fascinating individual. She's mentioned, I think, 27 times in a declassified intelligence dossier about how the Russians interfered with our election. So she is an important person in the scheme of all of this. Incredibly defiant, completely dismissive of the idea that RT would have somehow had a hand to play in the American elections, completely dismissive of fake news, the idea of fake news trolls creating fake news pieces for the internet. It was a fascinating trip through the looking glass, to be honest. It was almost like the alternate reality where none of this happened. And she said repeatedly, this is all you're doing. We just want to be friends. Russia just wants to be friends. Stop sanctioning us. Stop saying these terrible things about us. The facts and the information and the intelligence that we've gathered in the West, that is completely dismissed by Margarita Simonyan and her cohorts in the Kremlin.
Alex, we are living in very interesting times.
We are living in very interesting times.
So this is your first time on the first season that you're on the Circus, right? So you actually do a lot of interviews. You traveled a lot. You went to London, Moscow, Washington. Okay, good stuff. So what else can we look forward to?
We're going to have a lot about the sort of drumbeat of war over Syria, which again goes back to Russia, the Mueller investigation, which again goes back to Russia. All roads lead to Russia, and a lot on sort of this geopolitical moment and how it's playing both abroad and here in the United States, what it means for the Trump presidency.
Alex Wagner, thank you so much.
Thank you. Sunday night, tune in.
All right. Well, you can watch, as Alex said, more of Alex's reporting when the Circus returns for season 3. It airs Sunday night on Showtime, a division of CBS.